You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. I'm super excited. We have my dear friend Melinda, the beauty broker all the way from New York City. We're doing yet another episode, and this one is about what's trending. I think based on you and me together, we should kind of have a sort of a pulse on what's trending, past, present, and future. Listen in so that you can get all the chisme, as my wife says, about what's going on in the world of plastic surgery. All right, welcome to another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. I'm super excited. It's my name is Dr. Roddy Raban, your host, and today we are here with Melinda, our beauty broker, our so-called aesthetic consultant, patient safety advocate, all the way from New York. Melinda and I have done a few episodes together. We're very happy to have you here. You're a great resource in that I think there's a lot of people who tout to be experts in the beauty industry. Those are usually overnight sensations, people who either had something done or have a lot of followers. But what I love about you and what you're doing is in terms of advocating for patients, I think you are really doing a great job of using research and evidence and all the different physicians you have and really trying to usher patients in what you feel is the best direction. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. So this session, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, let's start out with sort of this last decade, okay? What happened in the last decade from 2010 to 2020? What did you see in the decade? I'll tell you my thoughts in a second. But what was your
whole lot? We saw a lot this past decade. I mean, this was the decade of social media, and so much has happened, and so much was developed over this past decade, and a lot of the non-invasive. I feel like a lot of non-invasive procedures and fillers. They were really trending hard. The BBL. You know, the famous BBL where everyone's doing fat transfer. They want these really super curvy, hourglassy bodies. So more was more from, 2010 to 2020, this past decade. And we're seeing a lot of, the repercussions just kind of rearing their ugly heads now.
Yeah, of course. I mean, anything you do whenever you push the envelope, you're always going to kind of find that edge. I think for me as a plastic surgeon, what I noticed over the last decade was, was all the plumping effects. So what were the things that we saw? We saw obviously buttock growth, right? You went from J-Lo, which was considered to have a natural large butt, to Kim Kardashian, which then pushed the envelope to someone like Nicki Minaj, and it just kept on going. That really catapulted the BBL or fat transfer to the butt. There was always those implants, but then all of a sudden the BBL made it seem like it was a win-win, right? Because what you were doing with the BBL was that you were sucking out fat somewhere, aka undesirable, and then putting it somewhere, aka gaining, benefit. So that BBL trend was out of control. Of course, there was a ton of issues. I think I was on a few news outlets when there was a ton of deaths in Miami in particular, with women going in and getting what's called fat emboli and deaths. Yeah. It was not just in Miami, but it was really happening there that it brought to center focus. Filling of the lips got out of control. I mean, you had people that were it was becoming ridiculous to the point that, and that was popularized by the lip kit, which took it yet to, there's always someone that pushes it out of the park, Right. I found that so funny that afterwards she came back and she's like, oh, I reversed it. After you made $1 billion, you reversed your lips. Like, that's like
that's
insane.
Right. I no longer want the big lips anymore.
Yes, because I made enough money off of it.
Right.
Trends were also, I think that we saw some trends in terms of explantations.
Explantation, high definition lipo. We didn't talk about that.
So we'll get to, explantations is just the beginning. I think explantations were at the beginning of that trend, but it sort of started in 2019-ish. High def lipo, which I don't do, but that was super popular. People are going, what the F is that? Is that like high def TV? Is that 4K? No, but it's doing liposuction with laser lipo or things of that nature, or ultrasound liposuction where you would be etching, actually creating shape out of the fat. Again, that's a controversial conversation we'll get to, but
Right.
But that was
Everything's
trending.
so controversial.
Well, the
right?
thing about it is anything that you do that's at the outer edges is going to have repercussions. Repercussions then turn into controversy. It isn't so much that like if you don't have abs but you etch abs out of fat, that's controversial. Like, oh my God, but you're lying, you don't really have them. I don't give a shit.
Right, but what's going to happen when that ages?
Right. The controversy occurs as the aftermath of the procedure that you did. I don't really care if you want to have ginormous butt, but do you want to die over it? That's where the controversy occurs. Right. What other? This ponytail lift that Bella Hadid popularized, which is this sort of eyebrow lift, which
lateral endoscopic lateral brow.
Which, by the way, that's not a new thing. It was just popularized because again, it takes a celebrity to push it out into the realm. And then the lip lift. My God, I mean, the number of people having lip lifts. I'm talking 22-year-old girls with perfectly normal lips having a lip lift and they can't even animate or talk. Right. That's another popular thing. So those are a lot of the, at least as far as I saw, really big trending procedures in the last decade.
Trending in a lot of the wrong people, the wrong candidates. You're not the right candidate for something, you don't do it. But I think a lot of people were just like pushing the envelope. They really just wanted to get the procedure done because it was trending and they're doing it. So we're fixing a lot of it.
So moving forward, so then obviously like any pendulum, right? It eventually, I don't want to say normalizes, it just swings the other direction. Mm-hmm. Normalize would assume that the pendulum came back to the middle and stopped. It never does that. People always say, well, I'm waiting for it to normalize. It never normalizes. It just goes from the far, far left to the far, far right to the far, far left. So I don't necessarily know that anytime soon big butts are going to go out of favor, but we definitely know big breasts are slowly going completely the opposite direction. Completely.
And you do a lot of breasts, so talk to me about that. Well, I'll tell you, from just my experience and talking to clients, every single day we have about 3 or 4 clients who come in and say, I want these things out of my body. I think I'm getting sick. I think I have an immunocompromised system and it's creating some type of breast implant illness, or, I'm just worried about my health and I want to get these implants out. And it's one of these like exhausting conversations that I have to have with the client. What's the answer? What's the right and the wrong answer to that?
Well, I think this is really this is, me, I love to talk about things that are actually scientifically driven. So there are 2 separate entities and they're colliding at the same time.
And breast
One of them is BII, breast implant illness, which is now given a real name. Before it was all kinds of different names. Over the last decade, patients were constantly complaining of things and nobody knew what the hell to call it. Now we've called it something, so that's a start. And the other is ALCL. So for those listening, let's describe them so we know, because they often get jumbled together. ALCL is anaplastic large cell lymphoma. And what it is essentially is a lymphoma that occurs not of the breast tissue, but of the capsule around the implant. Mm-hmm. And while it is incredibly rare, it is real. And there's probably about 600 some odd cases globally over the last 20 years. And what it happens is, and they've kind of correlated for the time being to the textured implant. So you have an implant, the outer shell of it is made out of silicone. Some are smooth, some are textured. Textured means it's like sandpaper. And texturing was a biomechanical development that they did in order to do 2 things. One was to prevent the implant from moving around, so it was like a Velcro, and the other is they thought it would reduce capsular contracture. Well, anyways, ironically, it turns out that probably the inflammation that texturing causes over a long period of time causes in certain people the cells to get a little wacky, and then they create this lymphoma. The treatment for it is to remove the capsule, and it's curative, assuming that you haven't left it go a long time. That's ALCL. Moving forward, they've removed the textured implants off the market. Allergan, which is the company that was noted to have the majority of them, voluntarily removed it, and then the FDA later came back and said, okay, great, black box warning. So anyone who's worried about ALCL, if you are getting breast implants, you don't have to worry about it per se, because now there's only smooth implants in the United States.
Didn't they find one occurrence on a smooth implant?
They did, but I think they said that they thought the original implant was textured and then it was swapped to a smooth.
Okay.
So I don't think that right now they can say 100%, but there isn't any qualitative evidence either way, but anecdotally they have linked it to texturing. Okay. If you had textured implants, by no means should you run out tomorrow and call your doctor and be like, oh crap, I have textured implants, I need them out. You're not going to just wake up and you have ALCL. There are a lot of presenting signs. The first one is that your breast will enlarge because fluid accumulates. The second is that you'll get some redness, you'll get some tenderness. You're not going to have perfectly normal breasts and then boom, you have ALCL. It just doesn't work that way. So if you have no symptoms, I wouldn't run out and get anything done. Just keep an eye on it. Just like you monitor your breast tissue and you do an annual mammogram, you should be checking your breasts out regularly. That's ALCL. BII, because now we're talking about breast implant illness, is controversial. And up until this year, I kind of was like, I don't want to say that I didn't believe it, but I was like, where is the evidence? And I finally had my own patient. I had a normal, run-of-the-mill, beautiful mom who came into me, super fit, really down to earth. I did a breast implant on her. Great candidate. She ended up developing capsular contracture, very fierce. And then she started having all kinds of constitutional symptoms. What are those? Fogginess, memory loss, aching, this, that, the other. All of them are constitutional. What does that mean? They're just general. And the problem with those symptoms is like, who the hell knows what that is? It's not like specific. Now, we went ahead and explanted her implant. We took the capsule out. And all of this is basically, again, based on her documentation. She says she feels amazing. So my conclusion thus far, because there's no science to prove it, they've done hundreds of studies, is as follows. There are 20 million plus women that have implants. The overwhelming majority of them are like amazing implants. I love them. I feel great. If you go on Real Self, the satisfaction rate is over 95%. There are probably a subset of patients in whom the implants create an inflammatory response. The body sees it as a foreign material. Instead of just creating a garden variety capsule, it generates a lot of inflammation, and that inflammation overwhelms their body. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think the overwhelming majority of patients will do well. I think some people, and we have no way of knowing who they are now, may not do as well with them, in which case that small subset will probably need them removed.
Well, I'm also saying, there's a lot of fear mongers about the breast implant illness out there. As soon as you talk about breast augmentation, all of a sudden our comment sections on Instagram get flooded with, how dare you, implants are bad. They're going to make you sick. And then they have their own blogs or their, own pages warning people or scaring people out of doing a breast augmentation with implants. And then I've noticed, because I monitor a lot of those pages too, that there are women who are like, hey, I thought I had breast implant illness and I explanted and I still have these symptoms. And a day later, that comment is gone.
Right. No, that's so. What you said is you're now being bullied on the other end.
Right.
It's kind of like you used to be bullied if you were a liberal.
Right.
And the conservatives would bully the liberals, and now the liberals are bullying the conservatives.
It's unbelievable.
Because it's whatever is at the time popular and trending. And so the reality is that, yeah, you're right. A lot of women are getting on these sites that, how dare you? We're doing this for, we shouldn't do this for men. And, you should love your body. And who wants to put poison in them? While all along the way, these people are, you're getting Botox and putting fake lashes on, and acrylic is known to cause issues with your nails and so on and so forth. I think at least my patient that I had this experience with was very mature. And she said, listen, I would love to have had implants. I tell my friends all the time to go get implants. It just didn't work for me. And that would be a mature way to have a dialogue, because we clearly know that those patients are in the far minority.
Right. Different bodies react differently to things, so I think you're right. It is more of an inflammatory thing.
The other issue is a lot of doctors are capitalizing on this, which is just disgusting.
So they're like,
oh, I'm an explant expert. Oh my God, I now do fat transfer. You should never put that poison in. And all they're doing is just basically capitalizing on fear. And they're just trying to create a sort of a niche for themselves while this is a hot topic.
There's a surgeon, Dr. Lynn Souter. Do you follow her?
No.
She's got a great page. She kind of makes a lot of sense out of it, but she speaks very logically, and it's all like on science-based evidence. And I just love everything she writes and everything she has to say. I'm like, you make the most sense out of any of these explant doctors that I've ever seen before. She does a lot of explantation, but she's a brilliant doctor. If you guys,
well, yeah. Listen, again, like I said, I think if the patient is reasonable and you have a conversation, because people think just explanting is just explanting. They don't realize, literally, I saw a patient last week who explanted and is miserable right now because her body, not because she doesn't feel good without the implants, it's because she looks terrible. And so she's here with her husband. She had an explant, and we're having a dialogue about what to do. And so it's not as if there's no ramifications. Obviously, if you don't feel well, your well-being is far more important than an implant. But you can't just rip them out and just think it's going to be all hunky-dory. It's not going to be that way. So
Right.
we were talking about, so explantation's a trend. Lip lifts are a new trend. Be careful, right? If you overdo your lip lift, you're going to end up looking ridiculous and you're going to regret it. What are the things that people are coming to you asking for that's trendy now?
Okay, so explantation, lip lifts, threads. So they want to do the threading to the lateral brow.
Right. So we talked about the thread. I did this actually in a Latino segment because they're a very popular community that loves plastic surgery, and they tend to, unfortunately, be often the first to get things done, and then they end up being the ones that are most complicated. The problem with threads are as follows. Number one, threads never will have longevity because the reality is you're not grabbing other than just some soft tissue. Second of all, majority of the threads are permanent. Some may be absorbable, but they inevitably cause inflammation and scar tissue. Third of all, they're almost always done by non-plastic surgeons or non-surgeons. That's why they were created. When you're a non-surgical practitioner and you have these patients with droopy brows or droopy jowls, and you have nothing to offer them, and all of a sudden you have this procedure that you could potentially do under local, well, holy crap. You're damn well sure they know they're going to be promoting it.
Right.
So I find thread lifting, which by the way, is not new. Thread lifts were here like 5 years ago, and then they were here 10 years ago, and it just keeps resurfacing because like that bad ex-girlfriend or bad ex-boyfriend that keeps resurfacing, it's going to be reinvented over and over again with no real advancement. So I'm not a huge fan of threads.
Okay, another trend, jawlines. Jawlines were a huge trend.
True.
And everyone wants that squared out, super sharp jawline. But I gotta tell you, I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it makes people look more masculine.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, one of my favorite procedures of all times is a chin aug. You've heard, I mean, I teach the course on chin aug. Why? Because having no chin and a very weak chin or weak jaw, you can't get over it. You can have droopy eyes, you can have big nose, you can have thin lips, but if you have no jaw or no chin, it's very hard to overcome that. Having said that, like everything else, taking it too far makes you look masculinized.
Right.
So,
I mean, we have a bunch of people walking around like G.I. Joe.
yeah, well, everyone can't pull off Angelina Jolie's jaw,
Right.
right? There's a handful of people that can pull it off, but I do agree with you that it's definitely masculinizing. You just have to be careful in the degree in which you do it.
Right. The cat eye trend, canthopexes. I mean, that's a risky one. I feel a lot of people want to change the shape of their eye, so then they go and do a canthopexy, and it really goes south. And we see a lot of that, and we've been working with a lot of oculofacial plastic surgeons to correct it.
That's a crazy one.
That is
right? That's a crazy one.
one.
Like, of the things we mentioned, that's up there in like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So people don't like the shape of their eye. And then what they do is they go and they have their eyelid shape changed. And the way you do that is you need to take the lower eyelid where it connects at the corner of your eye on the outer side, disconnect it, and then reconnect it higher or at a slant. And it is very difficult to do, very hard to get symmetrical, and almost always has some weird kind of funky look to it. Terrible idea.
Terrible idea. Liquid rhinoplasty.
So, liquid rhinoplasty. When you do a ton of noses, which for me is like maybe half of my practice, you're going to have patients that are coming in that are either way too complicated for revision, 3-time, 4-time revision that you should never touch, or barely need anything. And the idea of opening up their nose to redo it to fix it is crazy. Those are individuals in whom using a filler could potentially be great. Cautions. Number one, you can go blind from filler in your nose, and there are many reported cases. Number two, you can lose half or a big chunk of skin on your nose if you get intravascular injection. Definitely true and has happened. Number three, you should be using super thin material that is absorbable. So don't be using like Voluma in your nose. I only use Restylane.
Right.
So I think it's an amazing tool, but it's so treacherous. And if some people put a ton of it in the tip, trying to make a tip, and then you get necrosis. So the answer is yes, it's great. I love it when you do a lot of rhinoplasties. It's an amazing tool to have. Super careful.
Super careful. Another trend, a lot of people are coming to me. They want liposuction, but the only type of liposuction they want is Vaso liposuction.
Another crazy crap. So liposuction, if you notice, you will have 1,000 different names for it. smart lipo, slim lipo, laser lipo, ultrasound lipo, Vaso lipo, tickle me lipo, hydrojet lipo, high def lipo. What is all that crap?
Right. People get so
They're
confused.
all cannulas that you stick in and suck out fat and take out fat of different forms. The basic principle of liposuction is you remove fat and you pray that the skin doesn't become loose. And you remove fat cobblestone by cobblestone and you pray that you don't get any rippling.
Right. But people are saying a lot.
95% of the time you're going to get rippling and loose skin. So the thing about Vaso, it's the most aggressive of all those lipo.
There's a lot of poor technique with it too. So you really have to go to somebody who really practices great technique with it.
Very, very tricky. You're using heat. You get a lot of melting. You get a lot of heating. I've seen a bunch of patients with burnt skin or skin that turns very like beef jerky bark-like because of so much heat was amount. So again, I don't do it, but I think if you do go to someone, make sure that they're very versed in Vaso lipo.
Right.
Let's see here. So those are all amazing. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take a quick break. And then we'll come back. And I think what's really good is between the two of us, I'm sure we've seen a boatload of complications as a result of sort of new technologies and stuff. And maybe we can chat about what I've seen and you've seen so that people understand that just because it's new doesn't mean that necessarily it's the next greatest, best thing ever. So why don't you join us back here on Plastic Surgery Uncensored with my dear friend, Melinda, the beauty broker.
You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.
All right, welcome back to Plastic Surgery Uncensored, here with Melinda, my dear friend from New York. We were having a chat about trends, which I think is really interesting. You just rattled out so many of them that came to mind with me. We were about to go on to complications. You're like, but wait,
there's one more.
Buccal fat removal.
Yeah, buccal fat removal was a really big one.
What is your guys' from your end? I'll give you my thoughts. But what are people asking for in terms of that?
They want more of that cheek contour that could be achieved with making that dark line with your makeup to create more contour and make you look like you have a cheekbone. So a lot of doctors were advising patients like, well, we could just take some of that buccal fat that you have and remove it, which will give you that more like, that when you make a fish face, that sunken in cheek look. So it looks like you have more of a cheekbone. And, I think if there's excessive volume in the cheek, where your straight face and it's really like compromising the aesthetic and then really, really full in the mid face, then yes, if you remove a little bit of that buccal fat, but if you really pay attention to the outcome, usually you don't see too much of a difference. And you don't want to just go and voluntarily remove fat because we lose fat in our face as we age. So I'm not the biggest advocate of it. There's like 5% of people that really, really would benefit from it because they have that fuller face, that fuller cheek. But ultimately, I don't think it's a wise move. And I have to tell you that for the people who have done it, and it's been like 5 years out, 5 to 10 years out now that they did it, they say it's their biggest regret.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you on that. I think buccal fat removal, let's explain that to everybody. So people who are cheeky or chipmunky or full in their cheeks, who want that removed, they always ask, can you liposuction it? And you can't liposuction someone's face. You just can't do that. So there's a little area inside of your mouth that you can take out, kind of like the size of an egg yolk of fat that's called the buccal fat. And I do agree that the problem is just like a regular girl comes in and she wants a lip lift to look stylized, she'll regret it. If you're an older woman with a long lip, you're going to look amazing. Right. And the same is true of the buccal fat. So if you're a regular girl, there's no reason for you to take that buccal fat out because you will 100% wish you had it in 5 to 10 years.
Right. I actually have never had a patient who was in her 50s or 60s come in and say, I want buccal fat removal. Correct. They're like, I need that buccal fat back. Where did you put it?
So I think it definitely is a trendy one of those things that because it's quick and easy and doctors can do it in 20, 30 minutes in the office. So we both agree on that. So obviously, all of these things that we mentioned have complications. Some are early, some are late. And I've kind of touched on them like with BBL, pulmonary embolus, and an immediate death. We touched on a few of these things like...
Right, but let's bring it back to BBL again, okay? Because I don't think people realize when you transfer fat to an area, and I'm like speaking from personal experience. I did a fat transfer to my breast, and then I had gone and frozen my eggs and gained about 20 pounds after that. And all of a sudden, my breast went from like a full C to like a triple D overnight.
Correct.
So I don't think these people who are transferring fat realize that wherever you transfer fat will grow in 20-fold if you do gain even a little bit of weight.
And the reason that is if you notice, as we gain and lose weight, we don't gain and lose it symmetrically in every quadrant. You have, as everyone does, a propensity to gain fat more in other places. I have patients who come in, they have the thinnest waist and the largest ass. They have patients who have no hips and huge gut. So when you take the fat out, the fat is going to live under the metabolism of the fat it used to be. And where that became really evident is where people would take stomach fat and inject it in lips or under the eyes. And they would gain weight as they got older. And that fat in the eyes and the lips would grow much faster than the fat of their face.
Right.
And then it would
we see, I'm in New York. So we're in the area where Sid Coleman, who developed fat transfer to face. At that point, I don't think we realized like how much, is too much, or, how little do we put in? How much do we put in? So we're seeing a lot of those people who did have a lot of that fat transfer to face when it first came about, when the procedure was pretty much first developed. And a lot of these patients have gained a lot of weight and their faces really look distorted now because they've had a lot of fat to the face.
Right. And it's similar but different to like when you had silicone injected to your lips. The point being is that none of this stuff is static. I see probably once a month someone globally who had silicone injected in their lips and their lips have gotten crazy.
Oh my
and
God.
They have gotten inflamed and they're like, I've searched the globe. What do I do with my lips? And they're very pretty people. They got it injected when they were 25 in some party. And now they're like 45 and the thing is like taking over their life.
It's terrible.
So none of the things you do are in static. Fat, for example, is definitely face, body, wherever. It's going to change. And I think that's a really good topic. We were talking about with fat that segues into cool sculpting.
Right.
So cool sculpting, which is known as cryotherapy of fat, which is freezing the fat and it dying. First question is, does it really work? Yes, it does. Does it work in everyone? It depends on who you are, what type of fat you have, where are you having it removed. Like all technologies, there's good and bad candidates.
Right.
The issue is in a very small set, but a real set, instead of freezing and melting the fat away, the fat gets extra thick. It's paradoxically hypertrophies. It gets thicker. I had my first patient that happened to out of like in 15 years, and it happened to be someone who was a friend of mine. And when that happens, your only treatment is to liposuction that area, that fat that's created out. Luckily, you usually get a pretty good result, but just again, got to know what you're dealing with.
Right. And I've had a lot of people come in saying like, I've done 2 or 3 rounds of cool sculpting. Now it's like very cellulite in appearance in that area, in the same exact shape of the handpiece that they applied. So right. So having to reverse a lot of the stuff that we didn't realize was ever going to occur. And I find with technology, we do see a lot of those complications in later stages.
Right.
5-6 years down the line. But I mean, they're saying that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen right away.
No, and I think that's true. And I think what happens is I'll go to a meeting, seldom, but I go to one of these plastic surgery meetings. And if you go into the exhibit hall at any major national meeting, there's no less than 500 booths. I'm talking massive booths. And these booths each have like all this technology. I would tell you the next year when you go to the meeting, 90% of those booths won't be there.
Right.
And so the problem is that every year there's a bunch of practitioners running out and buying these technologies in hopes of luring in patients. You do these things and then they realize, well, shit, that was a terrible technology. Oh, that didn't work. Ooh, we shouldn't have done that at that level. We should have done it at half the level.
Right. Have you heard about, have you used the matrix fat? What is it, Renuva?
No, I'm the guy that when they come to my, it's funny. I'm known amongst reps that they can't make it past the first round of like the moat and alligators in my office. The only people I will talk to is anyone who comes with legit heavy duty science-based information.
Yeah.
I don't want to see before and after photos because I'm a photographer. 99.9% of photography is manipulated. High flash, low flash, moving of the face. There's so much bullshit. It's unbelievable. So I don't really know any tech. I have 2 machines in my office. I have a cool sculpting and I have an Altherapy, and both of them I wish I never bought, but I did because I bought them for those very unique subset of people. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I don't use shit. In Altherapy, we talked about it, right?
We talked about Altherapy. I mean, we see a lot of complications from that. There's a lot of women who are just traumatized from, even 1 round of Altherapy. They've lost so much fat in their face. It makes them more gaunt. Their face their faces seem more sunken in, lots of scar tissue. A lot of our facelifting surgeons calling me up saying, please warn your clients, tell them, not to go the HIFU route because it's creating a lot of scar tissue. We're having a lot of complications post healing with facelift surgery, a lot of seromas developing.
Yeah. Biotherapy, listen, when I got the Biotherapy, I think there's an indication for it. So they came out with it. What is Biotherapy? Alpha therapy means ultrasound therapy. So it's heat that's generated. The holy grail in plastic surgery is finding a machine that tightens skin.
Right.
Once I have that, I'm done. I'll have 8 of the machines. I'm good to go. There is no such machine.
Right. Because in order to tighten, it's really denaturing the tissue.
Yeah, you're basically, whatever the case is, heating it or whatever it is. So Biotherapy came out, and the idea was that it was the only FDA-approved device that tightens the skin of the face. So if you look critically at the results, you find out that in the faces that you see the best results, it were really full faces. And so if you look critically, what I've come to realize, and what's now you see both in results and in complications, is that you're actually melting fat. So we only do Biotherapy in individuals with really, really full, heavy faces. And in those patients, we get an amazing result. If you come in with thin face, not a lot of sub-Q fat, and you're starting to jowl a little bit, it's the worst thing you could possibly do.
Worst candidate for that exact procedure, yeah.
So one of the biggest things is, so this leads me to our last area, which is bad outcomes for unhappy patients. Unhappy patients should then go and help warn other people, right? So like if you're driving down a road, this is the analogy I use, and you fall into a major ditch and it flattens your tire, are you going to just keep driving away, or are you going to call the city and put a big sign there so some poor other soul doesn't fall into it? So if you go and get something done and you have a terrible outcome, it doesn't have to be through a state of anger or nastiness, but more protection of other people. You should be going and writing reviews, right?
You should. Review sites are kind of another controversial topic. A lot of my clients, they'll go, it really depends. They'll go onto these review sites. They'll be like, well, you referred me to Dr. So-and-so, and he's a revision doctor, and there's like so many bad reviews on this person. And I'm like, I know this doctor very well, and I know his work, and everything's really been pristine, everything that I've sent him, because I know I send him the right candidates all the time. But also, with the review sites, you want people to talk about the experience, but I think, there's two things. There's someone who started off with a bad experience from the get-go, and then there's that person who's had, who's 12 revisions in, and they're just never going to be happy, and it's hard to, get it right after 12 tries, and you go to a doctor and expect him to create a miracle.
Right, but the thing is, I'm going to go back. You're going to always hear this. I blame the doctor.
Right.
Okay, listen, I have probably 4 or 5 bad reviews. You can tell which ones are the crazy people. I waited in Dr. Raban's office for an hour. Really?
Right.
Okay, so that's a reason you.
Well,
but no, I tell you what I mean by that. If I'm a 12-time revision or nose patient, you should never operate on them, no matter what they tell you. Even when the patient tells you, Dr. Raban, I'm okay with whatever you do. No, I'm not operating on you. I only operate on people that I know I can improve. And I spend a lot of time vetting these people to see if they're not all there. So what I'm saying, though, is reviews absolutely need to be taken with a grain of salt. If you're an astute observer, you can read one and be like, fake. That was written by the office manager. Useless. Oh, my God, I had my breasts done. They look gorgeous. I love you. Dr. Raban, you're amazing. That's useless.
Yeah.
But there are reviews, and you'll read them.
That go into real detail.
Literally are
detail.
detail-oriented. I'm a 5'2", Asian young woman. I had ptotic breasts. I breastfed kids for 3 years. My concerns were I had a large areola, small nipples, blah, blah, blah. That's very helpful. And conversely, negative reviews where people are very descriptive, not angry, are very useful. I went to see Dr. So-and-so. This is what ended up happening. When I called the office, no one called me back. I was told this, and then that happened. So I think you can't, on both ends, I think reviews are useful as consumers. You just need to be careful. And I definitely think you as a consumer need to share your experience, while albeit good, but definitely when it's negative. Because I see a ton of revision patients. Maybe 30% of my practice now is revision. Revision breast, revision nose, whatever. And I often ask, I'm like, okay, well, what happened? Doctor did this, that, the other. I said, well, did you by any chance ever share that with anyone else and share that? And they're like, no, I just wanted it to go away. Well, what happens if your sister went and had her nose done by that same doctor? You'd feel shitty.
Doesn't matter regardless, because now a lot of these review sites are accepting payment to just delete all of the bad reviews or push them to the bottom. So it's a little sketchy. And like, I look at these review sites and I'm just like, okay, how does this review site really work? I always said a review site, in order to leave a review, there should be some type of a receipt that you need to submit. It needs to be like cleared by the office that this is an actual patient.
Correct.
And, that doctor needs to be honest about it and allow these things to happen. But I think that should be the only way that these review sites are run. And I don't think things should be deleted if it's an actual legit experience.
Well, you know how Yelp works, right? Yelp's being sued by almost, 50,000
So
small
many
businesses.
people.
The reason, because what Yelp does is they create this so-called proprietary software, which then allows them to filter and figure out what's real. So you go on my site and I have, let's say, 250 positive reviews. I have like 48 or 50 reviews that are so-called filtered. It just so happens that out of the 48, 47 of them are 2 pages long, but they've only been written by a guy with. So I do agree with you. I don't know what the right answer is. For sure they're monetized. For sure they're effed up. For sure they have faults and issues with them. And you just, like everything else, you have to take that in consideration with everything else.
Right.
If you go on a review, if you go on to someone's gallery and you look at their photos and they're all shit, right? And then you go and read 100 positive reviews, something doesn't add up. Right? You understand what I'm saying? So you got to be a better detective.
There's also some review sites that'll reach out to the actual business or person who the review is on. If it's a negative review, they're kind of like extortion scams.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, we're reputation management for so-and-so site. If you pay us $10,000 to $30,000 a month, then we'll remove this review from the site.
Correct. And so that is yet another example of how crappy. All of the process is a sum total of adding up all the parts. But, at the end of the day, you got to have the dialogue.
Okay.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I think that was a really good session on getting a feel for this last decade and where we're headed. And it's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having
me. Are
me.
you ever going to come visit us again, or was
of
are
course?
You just over this?
I really should be here once a month, but
once a
I
month.
will definitely. Yeah, it's hard. I travel a lot. I travel everywhere.
Oh.
So
it's
a globally based company, so we do a lot of traveling, but I try to get out here as much as I possibly can.
Well, when you're in town, you give us a call and we'll find the time to get you on, because we always love hearing your input. At any rate, it was a pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to Plastic Surgery Uncensored. As always, remember to share this with your friends. Make sure to follow our podcast and download it. Last but not least, where can people find you?
You could find me at Beauty Broker Official on Instagram, at Beauty Broker on Twitter, or www.thebeautybrokers.com.
There you have it. See you next time.
We would love to get your feedback. If you enjoyed and found our podcast helpful, tell us why. Give us a review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or you can go directly to revolverpodcast.com. If you have a topic you would like us to talk about, then please reach out to us on Facebook, Roddy Raban, Instagram at Dr. Roddy Raban, or RoddyRaban.com. You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.